Hi, I'm Urmi Desai, and this is the Move Smartly Show. For our episode today, it is our popular The Situation segment. This is where we take your questions for John about all of your real estate questions, concerns, worries, thoughts about what you might be doing in the Toronto area. I know this is really popular with our viewers. If you have a question that you would like to be considered on a future show, please email us at askjohn@movesmartly.com. And if you have more personal or specific real estate questions that you'd like to talk to John and his team at Realosophy about, you can find the contact for John and his team in our show notes. So with all that said, let's get on to the show.
Let's do it.
John, how are you?
Very good. Very good. How are you?
Our audience doesn't like when I talk over you, and I already did.
Oh my gosh. I think I talked over you.
Not a good start. All right, awesome. I know you really love this segment. I do too. So we have a few very not complicated, but complex questions. So let's get right into it.
Let's do it.
Hi, John. My partner and I have been waiting to jump back into the market. We called off our search last year after interest rates increased, which impacted what we could afford. And we were a bit worried prices might fall in 2024. But the latest headlines in the newspaper right now are talking about heightened buyer demand and increased bidding wars on homes again. So are we going to see another frenzied market this spring with prices rocketing up like they did early last year? And if so, will prices stay up for the rest of 2024 or fall again after the spike like they did last year? Thank you, Susan.
This
One of
is
your favorites. Guessing the
I've,
market question.
I gotta pull up my crystal ball. I mean, this is yeah, this is a tough question. We actually had a client with Anastasia, that Anastasia and I were working with that kind of is in a similar situation. I mean, they've been looking since the spring, but what has happened is anyone, even if you didn't hit pause on your search, if you've been looking for the past 6 months, the past 6 months, you've been experiencing a slow market in the housing market, not a ton of showings, homes sitting on the market longer, not getting bidding wars, right? And if you fast forwards to now, the dynamics are very different. You're going out looking at homes, and our clients are like, what the heck happened? There's like 3 people or 4 people at the same time that we're viewing. And why does this home have 8 or 9 or 10 offers on it? And yes, a lot of people are going to say, well, agents are just pricing them low, and that's why they're getting bidding wars. But the reality is in the fall, that wasn't a slam dunk. Like even in the fall market, you couldn't just price low and get a bidding war. That's why the number of homes that were getting bidding wars was down a lot, because the market just wasn't as competitive. So this idea that all you got to do is just price low and you get bidding wars, if that was that simple, the percentage of homes selling for over asking would not change, right? And the reality is it does change, and it increases when the demand is higher, because that pricing low to get multiple offers strategy really only works when the demand effectively exceeds the supply in terms of active and new listings, and you're going to get tons of offers. So we're seeing that even with some of our own clients who've been looking for a little bit, there's not a lot to choose from, and they're kind of getting frustrated because all of a sudden they find their bidding wars everywhere. So, to get back to the question, I mean, it's a very hard one. I think one thing to keep in mind is that, and a lot of people don't realize this, like January, February tends to be kind of the craziest months in terms of the number of offers homes get if they have multiple offers. And that just tends to be, I mean, everyone thinks the spring's the busiest, but it's really not. And this happens because most people start their search in January, February to sort of, plan to buy sometime in the spring. So, you get this big wave of buyers entering the market. And January, February tends to be months where there's just not a lot of listings to look at, right? So once 1 or 2 decent ones come out and they're priced well, everyone just gravitates to them. I mean, we had one of our clients who, and they're at a more expensive price point. They've been looking since the fall, and like there's just nothing to look at, and they're just sending us like the dumpy homes that have been sitting in the market for like 2 months. They're like, okay, there's nothing to look at. Should we consider this one, right? And our answer is like, no, because it's overpriced and we shouldn't. But again, speaks to kind of the frustration a lot of buyers are having. Now, just because homes are getting multiple offers and there's a lot of competition, it doesn't mean we're back to the frenzy of 2022, right? We don't know. It's still early to say like where prices are going, but we're probably not going to see huge upward movement. Like I don't think so, and for those who don't follow the housing market closely, most people at the start of last year thought 2023 is going to be sluggish, and then the market just went on fire, right? And we've talked about this on the show in the past. Part of that was because rates fell, because Silicon Valley Bank collapsed, fixed rates fell, that kind of fueled demand. Bank of Canada signaled that they were done raising rates in January 2023. Everyone went crazy. So there's a lot of factors that contributed to that. But we do have some factors as well today that are kind of stimulating buyers. And it's the idea that the increase in rate cycle is kind of behind us, right? And the next moves are going to be cuts. And it's just a matter of when and how many. And this is, I think, contributing to the increased demand. So to answer the buyer's question, they're just going to be jumping into a market that is going to be more competitive now than what is in the fall, for sure. It's not to say that there aren't opportunities to buy. I mean, we've had clients that just bought recently, like without competing. It just depends on the home. Like if you're looking at the nicest home that's staged very pretty and is ridiculously underpriced, you're going to have a lot of competition on it, right? With respect to that direction on prices, I'm kind of rambling. I mean, I don't know. I mean, who the heck knows where prices are going? I don't, I don't know if we're going to see a similar cycle as we saw last year. My instinct is not, because again, the cycle last year was like this frenzy that started in the spring because of the signal that rates would be low. And then rates increased in the second half, which is what kind of crushed prices. It's in the second half of 2023 where longer term mortgage rates went into the sixes, right? So we're unlikely to see those dynamics. So whether prices stabilize this year or inch up a little bit, it's very hard to say. But my instinct is that the market this year should be, and we talked about this, I think, in our roundtable, like my instinct is going to be a little more competitive than last year. And I think part of that is again driven by the increase in demand we're starting to see on the ground.
All right, thanks. I mean, I've watched this rodeo several times now from my ringside seat here at Move Smartly. Just two questions. I don't know if I'm getting this right, John. So, and I suspect that maybe Susan is wondering a couple of these things too. So I thought I'd check in. One, that frenzy that you tend to see at the beginning of the year, is that just because as we come out of the holidays, there is a little bit more buyer activity than listing activity? Like, sellers are a bit slower to get out in this colder weather, or why is that? Like, why do we see that?
So most buyers, if you think about when most buyers start to search, if they want to buy in the spring, most people kind of start thinking about buying in January, February. This is kind of when they jump back into the market. And certainly not everyone doesn't jump back in January. Some are kind of planning and getting their mortgage pre-approvals and are going to jump in February. But after the lull of November, December, where a lot of people put their search on hold, even the active buyers from the fall kind of jump back in, and then you get this new wave of buyers who say, you know what, let's jump in this year, right? I've been waiting, kind of like almost like this question. We're waiting for prices to fall. They haven't fallen. Let's just jump in now. And you get a lot of that happening. And it is most competitive partly because you have this bump in demand, but listings are incredibly low. Like there's very few people listing their homes in January, right? Like if you think about how most people in the Toronto area buy a home first, because it's competitive. And again, this isn't the best strategy all the time, but the most common thing is you buy a home and then you list your current home, right? So, if you think about who's listing in January, it's either people who bought in December or people who don't need to buy another home and they're selling their property, right? And that's why the listing volumes tend to be lower. Whereas if you move to the spring, you're getting all those people who bought in January, February, March who are listing their properties, and listings pick up. So it just tends to be the imbalance between the buyers and sellers is heightened in those months. Even though the sales volume is higher in the spring, you actually have more listings, so it's less competitive. And I think that's kind of what I mean. It's like January, February are more likely to see homes with like 20 offers. Whereas in the spring, you might have 5 offers, right? And assuming it stays a seller's market, obviously. I mean, if it's a buyer's market, like we saw in the second half of last year, completely different. But if it is a seller's market, you just get fewer offers, being bid on listings in the spring.
And it's an oldie but a goodie, but I sense from Susan's question, maybe the second part is, how much should we worry if we're a buyer and if we're in right now and we're worried again, like last year, there was a spike at the beginning of the year and then prices fell. And now you've bought earlier in the year. I know your common refrain is you can't time the market. So how much do I need to worry? It's hard not to, right? Like you don't want to
Yeah,
be
it
that
is hard
person.
not to. I mean, no one wants to buy and see prices dip, for their home. But I don't know what to say. Like, I think this is the tension. It's like I think you don't know when that right time is. I mean, that's why, arguably, if prices become more, if prices pick up a little bit now, the fall would have been a better time, right? But in that moment, you're worried prices are going to fall, so you kind of just sit back and don't jump into the market. So it's hard to say. I mean, again, like if I'm buying my home that I'm going to live in for a long time, I think the key thing always, what I always tell people is like you want to try to find value sort of in the market that you're working in and buying in, rather than trying to time the market, because there are always going to be some properties that are overlooked, and I think people don't understand this. Even when the market's competitive, in some neighborhoods, you're going to have like 3 homes that get listed at the same time, and they're all kind of comparable. But, the one that is the nicest and priced the lowest because they just ridiculously underprice it is going to get all of the offers. And then these other 2 homes that are good but look inferior to the most pretty one, which is like even less expensive, are going to get fewer offers, right? So sometimes it's just even a matter of like strategically figuring out which home to bid on, because again, everyone's going to gravitate to the one that looks like the best deal, and not thinking about what it's actually worth. Whereas, these other homes that are priced well and are very good, and on any other week, a buyer would have wanted to bid on, some buyers are going to overlook to chase this ridiculously underpriced home that, is staged a lot nicer, right? So even in this market, if you kind of are thinking more strategically, you can bid on the homes that are going to get less offers and are probably going to sell closer to their value and not going to have 20 bids on them, are going to have 3 bids on them, right? So, and this is some of the things that we talk about with our clients. And again, ultimately, it's their decision which home they want to bid on, but they just need to be mindful of strategy and what the likelihood is getting a particular home is, and whether there is some advantages to just be more strategic even about which home you're bidding on.
Right. And it seems then what you're saying is that unless you're in a position where you're buying and selling, the quick fluctuations of the market, like within a year, we maybe don't need to worry about as much if, like Susan, the letter writer or questioner, you're just buying. Like, is that fair to say?
Well, I think we still worry about the fluctuations. But I mean, I think my point is you can't predict them. Like all of these little peaks and valleys are unpredictable. No one predicted last year in the first half of 2023 that prices would increase. No one, like I don't know anyone that did, right? It was not intuitive. Like rates had gone up significantly. Um, and no one predicted that prices would dip in the second half the way that they did, because we didn't think fixed rates would go to high sixes, you know what I mean? And demand would get crushed, and inflation would pick up, which kind of obviously sent kind of pessimistic signals in the market. So you can't time and predict these things. Like it's freaking impossible. So, which is why, like, it's always, I mean, again, like when I'm buying, I'm kind of thinking like, where are my home price going to be in 10 years when I want to sell, not where are they going to be in the next 6 months? Because I can't predict the next 6 months. And I know that, I'm active on Twitter, obviously, and a lot of people have strong opinions, and like everyone's like, this is the worst time to buy. And listen, if someone's very anxious, then don't buy a home. You know what I mean? Like, because you can't beat yourself up if prices dip 5%, because you can't predict those things. At least I don't know anyone who can predict them.
All right. So some calming words for Susan. Hopefully that helps. All right. Let's get to our next question. Hi, John and Urmi. I really enjoy your show. I own a condo townhouse in Mississauga and I would like to sell sometime this year, but I'm not in any particular rush. I'm trying to figure out what the best time is to sell. Is it better to sell my home now during the spring market in May, June, or wait until the fall market in September? So it looks like those are three options there. My friend told me that the spring is the best time of year to sell because sales are the highest. I've also heard that September might be a busy time to sell if interest rates are lower by then. I would appreciate your thoughts, Steve.
Hmm. This is almost like the flip side of the last question. Um, so again, I mean, let's kind of break out the comparison. So there's three, either selling now or selling in the spring, May, June, or selling in September. So between now and in the spring, I mean, if I was selling my home, I'd rather sell now, to be honest with you. If you had a choice, because like I said, like this is the time where you get, and that depends on the property and the location, of course, but just in general terms, like I said, it's you get the most competition. And sometimes when you have a lot of competition, you get these slightly irrational prices, right? So just going off of like historical trends, and I don't want to say this happens every year, but in many kind of normal years, it's usually January, February where you get like some of these outlying prices. And not every home sells for an irrational price, but some do, where you're like, what is this person thinking? And then as new listings hit the market, prices stabilize. So it's not like they're lower or much lower. You just start to see fewer of these outlier prices, right? So I probably would go with earlier to maybe get one of these higher prices and get a little bit more competition. Um, again, it doesn't necessarily mean there's going to be a huge gap if you just get market value. That being said, between, now or the spring and September, I mean, who knows? Again, this is more like a crystal ball question. And it's very hard to predict, because I think a lot of it is going to depend on, macro factors, inflation and interest rates. And right now the signals are that rates will be lower. Um, and if that happens, yeah, we might see a little bit more demand, but it's very hard to say where prices will be, because a lot of that also depends on sort of the number of new listings kind of coming on the market, right? So it could be more competitive, or it could be kind of flat and boring if we see an increase in listings that are above average, which we kind of saw, last year, like this imbalance, like demand pulled back, but new listings increase, and that's partly what cooled the market. So it's very hard to predict. I think again, almost like the home buying situation, like, I think you kind of also want to factor in just what works better for you. You can't predict or time all of these things perfectly. So I do think your own like personal life circumstances or might work better also helps, because it's not predictable. I mean, I can't predict it. I don't know anyone who can say with any confidence where home prices are going to be in September.
So I'm getting the sense again that you're again saying play according to the conditions you're in. So if you're in that early market we're seeing right now of the year, you're saying this is fewer buyers a few more buyers than we would have seen it
Yeah.
around the holidays, chasing few homes. So
Yes,
if you can
exactly.
get in there and be one of those homes, there's some impetus there. However, the spring market you're saying is the highest by sales volume. So is this when the most amount of transactions take place? Every
Exactly. Yeah, and that's kind of, and we actually had, now that I think, but we had a meeting with Maria with like a seller client who had the same situation, and that's what we talked about. That again, there's this impression that September, like the spring, is the best because there are the most buyers and the most sales. But like I said, the key issue is the balance between sales and listings and how competitive the market is, right? So again, like usually it's not that, prices are relatively similar. It's just usually if you get some of these like a bit crazy prices, usually they're in January, February, right? And obviously that's not a hard and fast rule, because it didn't necessarily, well, it kind of did apply last year. January, February was crazier than June of 2023, but it doesn't apply in every year, but usually that's what happens.
unless you just had that weird added bump of a bank goes bust in the US, and it's
Exactly.
like the butterfly effect. And
Exactly.
of course, Canadians just jump on real estate whenever something happens. Um,
100%.
and then, John, is the fall market then by volume the second largest of the year? Or
Yeah.
yes,
And
okay.
that's a good, yeah, exactly. So basically, if you think about the two sort of waves of when buyers jump into the market, the first is like early in the year, so people can buy in the spring. And the second is people just jumping in September, right? To buy something September, October, November before sort of the holiday season. So you see, so you obviously see the buyers who couldn't buy in the spring, who kind of just roll their search over to the fall, but you also see new buyers hitting the market as you move to the fall.
And a question for you. I don't think Steve mentions, oh, they do mention it's a condo townhouse in Mississauga.
Yeah.
Now, how does that factor in? Like, is that bunch in the spring needing to find a home because of school starting? So is that where you get most of the demand for, let's say, single family home or townhomes or semi-detached?
Mhm.
Whereas if you just have a condo apartment, maybe the demand's a little bit more even over the year, or is that even fair to say?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I mean, certainly that does happen. Like, again, a lot of this spring boom is people who want to buy and be moved in by the summer before the start of the school year. I mean, and yeah, you do raise another good point. I mean, like if we're looking at it with a client, while we do think sometimes this is the better time, you also want to look at what's going on in their market, right? And if there's a ton of inventory right now and things aren't moving, like you need to factor this into your analysis and understand why and how you're going to compete and what's going on. When you list, how are you going to compete with all of the other inventory, and why is the inventory sitting? And is it more helpful for some of the inventory to clear before you list? So I think you want to look at some of your very local factors as well, as these broader and more general kind of trends that I've talked about earlier.
Great. So hopefully Steve found that helpful. I am now going to move on to our next question. Hi, John. How are you? Oh, sorry. First sentence. And let me try that again. Hi, John. Hope you're doing well. The reason I'm writing this email is that I need your advice. My husband and I are looking to buy a detached home. We are in our mid-50s. This would be a big purchase and honestly a sort of retirement investment. We are not looking to flip it in the short term, but would hope that the home appreciates enough for us to realize some gains when we downsize in the future. Based on where we live and work, we would want to buy a home in Oakville, York Region, or North York, and our max budget would be 1.5 million. From my understanding, house prices have declined more in the suburbs, so that's Oakville and York Region, than in Toronto, and North York is in Toronto. But I've noticed that Oakville houses seem to be selling faster recently than North York and York Region. My question is, what area do you think will be a better investment over time? Really appreciate your time, expertise, and advice. Warm regards, Syra.
This is a good question. I again, it's a very difficult one because you can't. I mean, it's really about a question about predicting the future path of home prices across different regions of the GTA, which is a very tricky question, right?
It seems like that's really the question underlying all the
Yeah,
questions.
exactly. And what I would say to that, and okay, I mean, the first thing I would say is, the very recent trends, are of course important that we're talking about, like prices falling a little bit more in some areas or another very recently. But, the way I'd approach this is, you know, we would take a client and basically um, tour each of the areas that they're most interested in, right? And try to understand the types of homes and in the types of areas they're considering. So the part of it is like there are personal factors, like which regions have homes that you like that are in a size and a condition that you're going to want to move into in the long term, right? And then just say you've narrowed that down into one or two neighborhoods in each municipality. Well, then you've got to look at the factors in each municipality, in each neighborhood that might be different. So you can't really just say, is Oakville going to do better than North York? Because North York's a huge area. Oakville's a huge area, right? And rates of appreciation can vary even within a municipality. So you want to sort of zero in on the neighborhoods that have the type of housing you like. You obviously want to factor in those differences because that's going to matter. And assuming you found a few that you're indifferent across these regions, then you've got to kind of make an educated guess of which areas might do better. And, that's going to obviously depend on a lot of factors, including the type of housing that is already in that area. Are you, is someone buying a two-story detached home in an area with two-story detached home, and that's what you're going to sell 10 years from now? Or are you buying a bungalow where it's largely land value, and in 10 years, people are buying that to redevelop into, either a McMansion or a multi-unit home or whatever it is? And are you close to new transit routes? Like, there's so many factors that you need to kind of look at. But again, I think you need to sort of zero in on the neighborhoods that I think are of most interest, and then determine from there, or try to make an informed decision about which areas have a higher likelihood of appreciation. Because again, this is all just opinion. I mean, you can't predict these things. You're just trying to make an educated guess, basically.
So what's interesting there, John, is you're saying the neighborhoods that are of most interest to you. Now, do you mean to live in, or
Yeah, to
that
live
you think
in.
will appreciate? And
I
it's
don't.
interesting that though she's saying this is kind of an investment, you're starting with can you live there? And I wonder if there's some
Well, I think that's.
experience behind there.
I mean, I think that's okay. I mean, I'll give you an example, and that is 100%, because when people come to me and in the past and be like, okay, I want to buy in the neighborhood that has the highest potential for appreciation. Okay. And historically, if you look at sort of even the academic literature, and even from my own experience, the areas that tend to outperform are not the blue chip neighborhoods that we all know. It's not like the Riverdales and the Lee Sides and all of those, those are like the blue chip stocks, right? It is the neighborhoods that are a little gritty today, that are just outside the blue chip neighborhoods, right? And when you take people there and you're like, this is the area, and they're like, well, I don't like the homes here. And there's a lot of homeless people. Like, why are these shops? There's not a lot of great coffee shops and not a lot of great restaurants. I'm like, yeah, because the commercial strip is gentrifying as the neighborhood is, which means the whole commercial strip does not have the type of shops that you would maybe like, because some of them have been there for 40 years, but over time they turn over, right? And this is the challenge when you try to prioritize appreciation above everything else. It just might not be the neighborhood or the type of home you like, right? So that's why I always say it's better to sort of take the opposite route and focus on the type of home and the neighborhood you like first. And then from there, you can make some informed, decisions or guesses or estimates, right? But it's those other factors. You're going to be living in the neighborhood for 10 plus years. You need to make sure that you are, buying in an area that you're going to be happy in, and in a home that you're going to be happy in, right? Because those are the known factors. The what might appreciate more is an unknown that you're trying to guesstimate effectively, right? So you want to start with the known variables that are important, and then kind of focus on the other factors.
I wonder if you've ever seen people try to invest in neighborhoods and then kind of call you very quickly and say, we really can't stand living here. Like, have you come
Yeah.
across cases where people try to make that investment over a lifestyle play?
Very rarely, because once they go there, they realize they don't like the area. It's not what they expected.
Right.
And I'll say the only clients who I've worked with that can do that tends to be investors. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like someone who's buying, for example, a triplex, right? So a 3-unit home that they're renting out. They're more open to consider because they're not living themselves, but they're looking at it objectively as an investment, right? And if they buy the thesis that I'm kind of proposing and saying, yes, I think this area will do better than XYZ areas, then they're more inclined to go with it. because they see it as an investment. The sale price is going to be a little bit lower. Their rent yield is probably going to be a little bit better. So they can see some of the potential there. But again, I think that's a unique person who's just buying like a multi-unit home as an investment that they're going to rent out. And it's purely an investment decision.
Or an end user buyer like you, who I know prefers just slightly grittier neighborhoods. But again, that comes down to taste. Now, just finishing up with the stock analogy about blue chips. So the reason why a blue chip, Sarah doesn't mention that they want a super fast depreciation rate, but then a little bit. Now, a blue chip, a neighborhood that's popular, the idea in stocks is it retains its value. It might not appreciate as fast as,
Yeah.
let's say, a neighborhood that's a bit grittier and it climbs, the prices have more to
Mhm.
climb. A
Mhm.
blue chip, the prices are already at a certain range.
Mhm.
You expect them to hold their value,
Yeah.
right? And so, do you think uh, does that actually apply to homes when it comes to certain neighborhoods within the larger areas that you're saying? Like, and the reason I'm asking this, John, is because we have heard about cases of people going into slightly suburban areas and like to
Mhm.
the new builds and areas like that, which
Mhm.
it seems like every time there's a bit of a market downturn,
Mhm.
some of those areas out there do tend to see a downturn in appreciation quickest. So is there a difference between, what I mean, the blue chip and then something that is not quite gritty, but almost like the new subdivisions, if you get what I mean?
Yeah, so I think what you're talking, so the some of the blue chips established areas, you're right, tends to be a little bit more steady. Now some of the volatility, for example, that we saw in the suburbs, and I think this is almost like one of the part of the question, and suburbs falling more. I mean, suburbs fell more or were falling more partly because they increased more at the start of COVID. Like if we think of the boom in home prices between 2020 and 2022, it was really a suburban predominantly phenomenon, right? So those regions saw much more rapid increase at that time. Most recently it was because of this exodus. People wanted detached homes, they wanted bigger lots. And when the
During
market found
COVID. Sorry to interrupt you, John. The
yes,
COVID exodus.
during the COVID exodus. And then when things normalized and prices adjusted again, there's that the higher you rise, the harder you're going to fall, right? So and even if some of those neighborhoods in the suburbs were kind of blue chip established neighborhoods, they did not avoid those effects because again, if you're outperforming the market because of some frenzy, you're going to usually feel the negatives of that when the market adjusts, whether you're established or not, and the suburbs is a little bit different because unlike, downtown Toronto, there are fewer kind of gritty, older, not gentrified air, you know what I mean? Than you have in the city. So most of the suburban areas are not like that, but certainly, obviously, there's price differences across them. But yeah, so regardless, I think many of the suburban regions felt that partly because of this exodus. So it's hard. There's no like hard and fast rule, and I think that's the challenge when we talk about which areas are going to appreciate more than others. Like that wasn't again a predictable thing. When we look at in 2017 when prices surged in the suburbs, it was largely York region, followed by the other suburban regions more than the city of Toronto. And again, this was driven by, and I wrote a report this in 2017, a surge in demand from investors buying low-rise homes, predominantly detached homes in the suburban markets. And the biggest increase in demand from investors was in York region, right? Who knew? I mean, you couldn't have, in that moment, you couldn't have predicted that, right? So there are some things that we can try to estimate, but there are other factors that are impossible to predict.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, the key is to zero in on the neighborhoods that you're interested in, and then look at the recent market conditions in those neighborhoods to see what's going on. Because I suspect that had you been looking at some of those specific neighborhoods in York region during that bubble
Mhm,
period in 2017,
mhm.
if you had done your analysis, would have been able to see a bit of a run up in prices, but only because you were looking at that neighborhood or that area.
Yeah, exactly. And we saw when we were looking at the data that some regions and some neighborhoods in particular did see a far bigger increase in home prices than other neighborhoods, even within York region and even within the suburbs, right? And it did it in that instance highly correlate with demand from investors. So, but again, I mean, I think I can say I saw that at the moment because I wrote my report literally just as the market was turning. But we did observe the appreciation. I couldn't say what was causing it at the moment, or it's not like I predicted all of that stuff. But yeah, I mean, if you're looking at it closely in hindsight, you would have seen some of these differences across the neighborhoods.
Right. I recall you telling us a story about you experiencing that because your clients were looking in those areas. You were able to you always your practice is to then run the data and look at what's going on, and you started to see it. But again, that's not something that you could have broadly said this is going to happen in York region this year.
Yeah,
It
exactly. No, and
it
you
was
look at the
more
air. Yeah, you look at the area that your client's interested. You look at the rate of growth. I mean, when they're looking at it, and like prices are up like 40% in 1 year. And the average in the GTA is like 30. I mean, that's like a bit troubling. That's not a normal rate of appreciation. And we had clients that were like doing, like considering even the suburbs and some markets in Toronto. And when you looked at Toronto, many Toronto neighborhoods did not see that rate of appreciation. I mean, it's still high. It was like 20%, but it wasn't 40%. And some of the suburban neighborhoods literally went up 40% in a single year in 2017. So, you got to look at again, and I think it comes down to why I said earlier, you need to think about the neighborhoods, not just the municipality, because neighborhoods across a municipality can appreciate and depreciate at very different rates, and we can't concern ourselves with the short term unpredictable. We're trying to think about sort of the longer term factors that might influence a neighborhood's potential appreciation when we're thinking about some of these questions.
great. So thank you, Sarah, for your question. Again, thanks to all of you for watching. I'm going to repeat again, if you do have a question you'd like to have us consider for this show, please email us at askjohn@movesmartly.com. Other than that, John, people can follow you on, I'm calling it X Twitter, at John Pasalis.
Yes, X Twitter.
X Twitter. Our show is at Move Smartly on X Twitter, and you can find us there. You can also see all of our contact notes in the show notes. So other than that, it's just left for me to sign off. Thanks again, John. Thanks to all of our watchers and listeners, and we will catch you soon.
Yeah, thank you all for your questions.